I am Olivia Williams, 28 years old. I grew up in a house where love felt like a spotlight, and that spotlight was never on me. If my sister so much as breathed in the right direction, my parents clapped as if she had conquered the world. When I brought home achievements of my own, the response was always muted, like background noise they could barely hear. She was the golden child, the center of their universe. I was the shadow that stretched long behind her, always there, never noticed. I remember birthdays most vividly. My sister's cakes were layered, decorated with professional precision, candles glowing like a stage performance. Friends and relatives gathered, gifts piled high, laughter echoing through the rooms. When it was my turn, my cake was a single sheet, sometimes store-bought, with my name misspelled more than once. No balloons, no fanfare, just a casual reminder that my existence didn't warrant celebration. That's the rhythm my life fell into. She shined, I dimmed. She spoke, I stayed quiet. She mocked, they laughed. And when she hurt me, they brushed it off as if I were too sensitive. Still, I tried. I wanted their approval so badly that I ignored the gnawing pain of being overlooked. I studied harder. I took on responsibilities no one else wanted. I offered help, support, loyalty. But no matter what I did, I was always the other one. Over time, I learned to build a shell. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped expecting to be noticed. Instead, I created a world outside their reach, one where I could grow without their constant comparisons crushing me. That's how I found him, my husband, but they didn't know him. They didn't know the life I was building quietly, far from their mockery and favoritism. To them, I was still the scapegoat, the one they could belittle to lift my sister even higher. When my sister announced her wedding, the favoritism rose to new heights. The entire family rallied around her, treating her big day as the event of the decade. My mother called me, not to ask if I was doing well, but to assign me tasks. "Make sure you wear something simple," she said. "We don't want to distract from your sister." As if I ever could. I swallowed my pride, like I always did, and told myself I could survive just one more family gathering. It wouldn't kill me to endure their backhanded comments, their dismissive glances, their laughter at my expense. After all, I had endured it for years. But deep down, I felt something different this time. Maybe it was the strength I had gained from the life I had built on my own. Maybe it was the quiet confidence my husband gave me, reminding me that I wasn't invisible. Not to him, not to the people who truly mattered. Whatever it was, I carried it with me like a secret. As the wedding day approached, memories of past humiliations haunted me. The time my sister wore a dress identical to mine at a family party only for my parents to call hers elegant and mine ill-fitting. The time I saved up to buy a graduation outfit only to hear my father laugh and say, "Well, at least your sister will look good in the photos." Those moments clung to me like scars, invisible to everyone else, but etched deeply into my heart. So when I picked out my dress for her wedding, I didn't choose it to compete. I chose it for me. It was modest, yes, but meaningful. A piece that symbolized independence, self-respect, and quiet strength. Something told me it would be tested. And I wasn't wrong. The night before the wedding, I overheard my parents talking on the phone with relatives. "She's coming, yes, but don't expect much. You know how she is. Always a little plain, never quite right. At least her sister will be radiant." Their words didn't sting the way they used to. Instead, they burned into me like fuel. I knew they were wrong. I knew I wasn't plain, or invisible, or worthless. They just couldn't see it, or maybe they didn't want to. But soon they would, because this wedding wasn't just a stage for my sister to shine. It was also the stage where my years of silence, humiliation, and being treated like less would collide with the truth of who I had become. I didn't know exactly how. I didn't know exactly when. But I felt it. The tide was turning, and the moment I walked into that wedding hall, dressed in the gown they had mocked in advance, I realized I was about to learn just how far their cruelty could go, and just how far I was willing to rise above it. The weeks leading up to the wedding were like watching a play unfold, except I already knew my role. The background character, the filler, the one who makes the real star look brighter. Every phone call from my mother was the same. Instructions, reminders, Thinly veiled criticisms. Don't wear too much makeup. Don't pick anything flashy. Remember, this is your sister's moment, not yours. As if I had ever stolen a moment from her in my life. I tried to let the comments slide off me, but the weight of them built up. My husband noticed before I even said anything. He'd see me hang up the phone, my shoulders slumped, my eyes clouded. He'd pull me close and remind me, "You don't have to prove anything to them. You've already built your life. You're more than their shadow." Those words mattered more than he knew. Because while my family was busy positioning me as the eternal supporting act, he saw me as the main character of my own story. The contrast between the way my parents treated me and the way my husband did was like night and day. With him, I felt seen, respected, valued. With them, I felt erased. As the wedding planning escalated, my sister took full advantage of her golden child status. She'd call me not to invite me into her excitement, but to mock or control. "What are you even going to wear?" she asked one afternoon, her voice dripping with false curiosity. "Don't embarrass me, okay? This isn't about you. We don't want people whispering." People whispering? The only whispers I ever inspired were ones my family created, belittling me so loudly behind my back that they didn't care if I overheard. I laughed it off on the phone, but inside, a storm brewed. I had already chosen my dress. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't extravagant. But it was me. And that was enough. Or at least, it should have been. The days ticked by, and I could feel my anxiety rising. I told myself I was stronger now, that their words couldn't cut me as deeply as they once had. But old wounds don't heal so easily. They linger, waiting for moments like this to reopen. 2 nights before the wedding, I arrived at my parents' house. My husband and I decided to stay at a hotel nearby, knowing that sharing a roof with my family in those tense days would be unbearable. But I still had to face them. The first thing my mother said when she saw me wasn't, "Hello," or, "I'm glad you're here." It was, "That's what you're wearing tomorrow for the rehearsal dinner?" Her tone wasn't neutral. It never was. It carried judgment, disapproval, and a hint of embarrassment, as though my very existence was something she needed to apologize for. My father barely looked up from his seat, and when he did, it was only to ask, "Did you remember the seating cards? Your sister doesn't want mistakes." It was always about serving her, about keeping her moment pristine, about making sure nothing distracted from the perfect picture they wanted to present to the world. I nodded, held my tongue, and reminded myself that silence was often my greatest shield. But inside, my resolve hardened. The rehearsal dinner was a preview of what was to come. The room buzzed with laughter, glasses clinking, and endless praise for my sister. "She looks radiant. She's so lucky. What a perfect couple." And then there was me, sitting quietly at the edge of the table, my presence acknowledged only when necessary. My sister found small ways to jab at me, commenting loudly that I should keep it simple for the big day. "We don't want anyone confusing you for the help," she joked, her voice cutting through the laughter. The table erupted in amusement, everyone but me and my husband. I smiled politely, but my heart sank. The sting wasn't new, but it was sharp all the same. That night, back at the hotel, I cried. I let out years of frustration, humiliation, and the weight of never being good enough in their eyes. My husband held me, his hand steady on my back, his words steady in my ear. "Tomorrow, just be yourself. That's more powerful than anything they could throw at you. Trust me." And I did trust him. I trusted that somehow, tomorrow would be different. Not because my family would magically see me, not because my sister would suddenly treat me with kindness, but because I wasn't the same girl they used to walk over. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror, my dress hanging on the door. I traced the fabric with my fingers, remembering all the times I'd been told I wasn't enough. Not pretty enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough. But this time I felt a quiet fire inside me. They didn't know who I was anymore. They didn't know the strength I carried now, the dignity I refused to let them take. I slipped into the dress, adjusted it carefully, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see the forgotten daughter. the scapegoat, the family's punchline. I saw a woman who had survived their neglect, their mockery, their cruelty, and who stood tall anyway. And as my husband came up behind me, his eyes lighting up at the sight of me, I realized something. I didn't need my family's approval anymore. Their opinion of me was powerless. But little did I know, they weren't done trying to break me, and my sister, on the biggest day of her life, would seize her chance to humiliate me in front of everyone. The morning of the wedding felt heavy, as though the air itself was thick with expectation. My sister's big day was all anyone in my family cared about, and the house buzzed like a hive of activity. Makeup artists, florists, and caterers rushed about while relatives whispered praises of the bride-to-be. I slipped quietly into the background, just as they preferred me to be. Still, I reminded myself of the mirror from that morning, of the strength I'd seen in my own reflection. I wasn't here to compete. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here because I had a role to play, to stand as a sister, no matter how thankless the position felt. When I arrived at the venue, I felt dozens of eyes on me. The hall was decorated extravagantly, dripping with roses and sparkling lights. My sister had spared no expense, and the entire space screamed of perfection, or rather, the performance of perfection. My mother glanced at me briefly when I walked in. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her gaze running over my dress like she was inspecting for flaws. She murmured. Not quite a compliment. Not quite an insult. But the message was clear. She didn't approve. I took my seat, clutching my purse, feeling the walls close in. For a brief moment, I wondered if I'd made a mistake by coming. But then I caught sight of my husband walking in behind me, his presence grounding me. He gave me a small nod, the kind that said, "You've got this." And somehow I believed him. The ceremony began, filled with the expected fanfare. My sister glided down the aisle in her designer gown, her face glowing with pride. Guests whispered about how beautiful she looked, how lucky she was, how perfect the day seemed. Every eye was on her, and that was exactly how she wanted it. It wasn't until the reception that things turned. The hall was buzzing with chatter and music, tables lined with food and champagne. People laughed, glasses clinked, and the atmosphere brimmed with celebration. I was speaking quietly with my husband when I heard my sister's voice cut across the room. "Everyone," she called, her tone sharp enough to draw attention. "I just have to point something out." My stomach sank instantly. I knew that tone. I had heard it too many times before, the beginning of a public jab at my expense. She gestured toward me, her lips curled in a smirk. "Can we all just take a moment to admire my sister's dress? It's brave, isn't it? I mean, I guess not everyone gets the memo that weddings are supposed to be elegant. But hey, she tried." The laughter started immediately, rippling through the tables like a cruel wave. Some people chuckled awkwardly, others laughed outright. My parents joined in, my mother covering her mouth in feigned politeness while my father shook his head with mock dismay. My face burned hot, every eye in the room suddenly on me. I felt exposed, like I had been stripped bare in front of them all. My dress, the one I had chosen with such care, the one that symbolized my independence, had become her punchline. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But then something shifted. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my husband rise slowly from his chair. His expression wasn't angry. It was calm, steady, controlled. And for the first time all night, the attention began to shift away from my sister's smug grin. He walked over to me, his presence towering yet gentle, and placed a hand on my shoulder. His voice was smooth but carried across the room with effortless authority. "I think," he began, "that my wife looks stunning. And I don't just mean tonight. I mean every day. Because unlike some people, she doesn't need a gown worth thousands to shine. She carries her dignity, her kindness, and her strength everywhere she goes. That's something no one here can mock, though some might try." The room fell silent. Forks clattered against plates. Laughter evaporated into thick, uncomfortable air. My sister's smile froze, her cheeks twitching as though she couldn't quite process that the script had flipped. My mother opened her mouth as if to interject, But even she faltered under the weight of his words. And me? For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not just seen, defended, protected, valued. The humiliation that had threatened to drown me was replaced with a surge of pride. My husband hadn't just stood up for me. He had shifted the balance of power in that room. My family, so accustomed to mocking me without consequence, suddenly found themselves confronted with the reality of their cruelty. The whispers that followed weren't about my dress anymore. They were about him, about us, about the quiet strength I carried that they had overlooked for years. I sat a little taller in my chair after that, my hands steady, my heart calmer than it had been in years. The mockery had backfired, and for once my sister wasn't the center of admiration. She was the one left scrambling, her perfect image cracking under the weight of her own cruelty. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. My family didn't back down so easily. They'd find ways to excuse her behavior, to downplay his words, to twist the narrative in her favor. Still, something had shifted irrevocably. The wedding was supposed to be her triumph, her shining moment. Instead, it had revealed a truth she couldn't escape. I was no longer the shadow she could mock without consequence. As the night went on, I caught my sister glaring at me from across the room, her eyes burning with something sharp, jealousy maybe, or anger at having lost control. And in that moment, I realized this was just the beginning. The wedding had been the stage for her public cruelty, but it would also become the stage where she learned that her power over me was gone. Have you ever reached a moment when years of swallowed pain suddenly choke you all at once? That was me, sitting in that reception hall surrounded by clinking glasses and false smiles, while my sister's cruel words still echoed in my head. Her mocking laughter should have broken me. It always had before. But this time, something inside me cracked in a different way. Not in weakness, in resolve. The wedding wasn't just another event. It was the culmination of every humiliation, every dismissal, every moment of being treated as less. My sister's public ridicule had been the last straw, and my husband's defense had lit a spark inside me I could no longer extinguish. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. As the night wore on, I noticed the shift in the room. Guests were whispering in corners, stealing glances at me and my husband. The glow that had surrounded my sister all evening had dulled, and she noticed. Oh, she noticed. Her eyes found mine across the hall, sharp with irritation, her painted smile stiff. For the first time, she wasn't entirely in control. She hated it. I could see it in the way she clenched her champagne glass, her knuckles white against the stem. I knew what was coming. She couldn't stand to be overshadowed, not even for a second. And if she felt her grip slipping, she would come for me. And she did. "Excuse me." Her voice rang out again, commanding attention like a seasoned performer. "I just want to clear something up about earlier. You know, when I complimented my sister's bold dress choice." There was a ripple of uneasy laughter. She was trying to spin it, to paint her insult as light-hearted, harmless. "But honestly," she continued, her eyes locked on me, "I suppose not everyone has the taste or resources to really shine at events like this. We all do our best with what we have, right?" The sting of her words was sharp, deliberate. My parents chuckled along, nodding, their loyalty to her as predictable as ever. For years, this was the moment where I would shrink, where I would force a smile, where I would let them strip me of dignity just to keep the peace. But not tonight. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. The room hushed at the sight of me rising, as though no one had ever expected me to speak, let alone stand tall. "My sister is right about one thing," I began, my voice calm but carrying. "We all do our best with what we have. The difference is, some of us know how to treat others with respect no matter what we're wearing, and some of us hide behind expensive gowns while tearing people down to feel taller." Gasps swept the room. My sister's face flushed red, her mouth opening but no sound escaping. For once, the script she had written, me as the scapegoat, her as the star, was unraveling. I felt years of bottled words surge forward. "Do you know what it's like?" I asked, my voice trembling but strong. "To grow up being told you're never enough? Oh, to have your achievements ignored, your birthdays forgotten, your existence treated like an afterthought, while your sibling is showered with praise?" Do you know what it feels like to be mocked in your own family? To be invisible until they need a punchline? The silence was deafening. No one moved. No one laughed. Every word I spoke cut through the air like a blade. My parents stared at me, stunned. My mother's hand fluttered toward her necklace, as though clutching pearls could erase the truth I was spilling. My father shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. They weren't used to hearing me speak. Not like this. And yet, I continued, my voice steadying with each word, despite all of that, I built a life. I built a family. I found love, respect, and strength outside of this toxic bubble. And tonight, when you tried to humiliate me again, I didn't crumble. Because I finally realized, I don't need your approval. Not anymore. My sister's eyes burned with fury. She took a step forward, hissing under her breath. How dare you make this about you? This is my night. I met her gaze, unflinching. Yes, I said quietly enough for only her to hear. But it's also the night everyone finally saw who you really are. Her face twisted, and for once, she had no clever retort, no staged laugh, no parental backup strong enough to shield her. The cracks in her perfection were showing, and everyone could see. I sat down slowly, my husband's hand finding mine under the table, grounding me in the storm of emotions coursing through me. My heart pounded, adrenaline rushing, but I didn't feel regret. I felt free. The reception limped on after that. The atmosphere irrevocably changed. Conversations were hushed, laughter strained. My sister forced smiles for photos, but her eyes were dark, haunted by the confrontation she hadn't won. And me? For the first time in my life, I felt the balance of power shift. I wasn't the invisible sister anymore. I wasn't the family's easy target. I was the woman who had stood up, who had spoken truth to years of cruelty. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. My words had pierced their illusions, but exposing the truth always comes with consequences. My sister, my parents, they wouldn't let this go. They never did. And yet, for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because I had finally realized something they could never take from me. My voice. You'd think after a confrontation like that, my family might stop, just for a moment, and reflect on their cruelty. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. People who thrive on power and favoritism don't surrender easily. They regroup, they twist, they retaliate. And that's exactly what happened in the days after my sister's wedding. The morning after, my phone buzzed with message after message, not of support, not of understanding, but of anger. How could you ruin her wedding like that? My mother texted. You embarrassed the whole family, my father added. And my sister? She didn't even bother with subtlety. You'll regret making a scene. Don't think for a second you stole the spotlight. Everyone was laughing at you. The old me might have believed her. The old me would have replayed every second, convinced I'd been wrong, that I had been dramatic, selfish, ungrateful. But the new me? The me who had found her voice? I didn't crumble, because something unexpected had happened. Quietly, behind the scenes, people reached out. A cousin sent me a late-night message. I'm proud of you. Someone had to say it. An aunt whispered on the phone. I've seen how they treat you for years. You were right to speak up. Even a few family friends, who had watched my parents' favoritism in silence, finally admitted they'd always pitied the way I was treated. It was like sunlight peeking through clouds I thought would never break. For so long I thought I was alone, but I wasn't. And the best part? My husband stood by me through it all. He didn't just defend me in the moment. He reminded me every day after that my worth wasn't up for debate. That my family's approval was a currency I no longer needed. But my sister wasn't done. Weeks later, she staged her retaliation. She posted photos from her wedding, carefully captioned with barbs that cut deep. Under one picture of us together, she wrote, "Some people try too hard to be noticed, but you can't fake grace." Her followers showered her with praise, and though few said it outright, I knew the message was for me. And my parents? They played along, liking her posts, adding comments like, "Our beautiful daughter, the pride of the family." Not daughters. Daughter. Singular. Every click, every word was a reminder. They were doubling down. They couldn't stand that their perfect image had cracked, so they were working overtime to glue it back together. But here's the thing about cracks. Once they show, they only spread. Because the more they tried to belittle me publicly, the more others started to notice. Relatives who had once stayed silent began to whisper openly. Friends of the family sent me screenshots, shaking their heads at how obvious the favoritism had become. My sister thought she was winning, but she was exposing herself. And deep down, I knew justice was coming. It didn't arrive with fireworks. It didn't come with dramatic declarations. It crept in quietly, the way truth always does. My sister, so obsessed with appearances, had overextended herself. The lavish wedding, paid for by maxed-out credit cards and loans my parents had co-signed, the designer gowns, the endless parties, the luxury photo shoots, they weren't funded by success, but by debt. And slowly, people began to whisper about that too. I found out when a family friend pulled me aside. "You know," she said carefully, "your parents shouldn't have stretched themselves so thin. Covering for your sister like this, it's not sustainable." For the first time, pity shifted. Not toward me, but toward them. The golden image of my sister was cracking wider, and this time, money was at the heart of it. And when bills came due, when the perfect facade started to crumble, who do you think they turned to? Me. The daughter they had mocked, the scapegoat they had belittled, the one they had laughed at in public, humiliated at every turn. My phone rang one evening. My father's voice was heavy, almost pleading. "We need your help. Your sister is going through a tough time financially. If you could contribute..." I didn't even let him finish. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years earlier, when I had begged them for support to go to college, they told me I wasn't worth the investment. They had poured every resource into my sister's life, her dreams, her whims. And now, with their golden child drowning in the debt of her own choices, they had the audacity to come to me, the scapegoat, the invisible daughter. For once, I held the power. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. They said I wasn't worth supporting. They laughed at me, mocked me, and made me the family punchline for years. At my sister's wedding, she humiliated me in front of everyone, and my parents cheered her on. But here is what they never expected. The girl they thought was weak had grown stronger than they could imagine. And when the perfect golden child S-world started collapsing under the weight of her own lies and debts, do you know who they came crawling to? Me. The daughter they had discarded. The sister they had mocked. The scapegoat they thought would never rise. And that's when I finally delivered the justice they never saw coming. I'll never forget the way the room shifted in that moment. 1 second, my sister was parading her cruelty like it was a crown, mocking my dress as though tearing me down was her wedding entertainment. The next, every pair of eyes turned, not to her, but to the man at my side. My husband. The silence was so sharp it could have cut glass. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. He simply slipped his hand into mine, and with a calmness that carried more power than her shrill laughter ever could, he said, "Funny how you mock her when you re-standing in a dress bought with someone else's money. Unlike you, she's never had to beg or pretend to be more than she is. She built herself." Gasps rippled across the room. My sister's smirk faltered, just for a second, and that second was everything. Because for once, she couldn't twist the narrative. She couldn't hide behind the golden child glow my parents had wrapped her in since birth. My husband had ripped it away with a truth she couldn't deny. I stood taller than I had in years. All those moments of humiliation, the birthdays ignored the school events where my parents clapped only for her, the college years when they dismissed my dreams as not worth the investment, they funneled into that single moment of vindication. The silence in the hall wasn't just embarrassment, it was recognition. Everyone finally saw the truth. Me. And yet, that wasn't the end. The universe has a strange way of delivering justice, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. In my sister's case, it came crashing down faster than anyone expected. Months after the wedding, whispers started surfacing. Her perfect marriage, the one my parents had boasted about, wasn't so perfect. Her husband had his own secrets. Debts, affairs, shady business deals. The pedestal they placed her on cracked under the weight of reality. And when it all came tumbling down, who did my parents call? Me. The daughter they said wasn't worth paying for. The sister they mocked for being less than. Suddenly, I was their lifeline. They begged for help, begged me to use the stability I had built for myself to rescue them from the mess of their own making. I listened. I let them plead, let them remember every cruel word they had ever thrown at me. And then, with the same calmness my husband had shown at that wedding, I told them the truth. You taught me I wasn't worth investing in, and I believed you until I proved you wrong. Now you'll have to live with the lessons you gave me. It wasn't screamed, it wasn't a spat with venom. It was spoken with the strength of someone who had finally stepped out of the shadows. And that strength was louder than any revenge I could have plotted. The beauty of justice is that it doesn't always come in the form of dramatic payback. Sometimes it comes in showing the people who doubted you that you rose higher without them than you ever could have with them. My life became the living proof of their failure to see me. Still, there's a part of me that will never forget the sting of those early years. The lonely birthdays, the wedding humiliation, the countless moments of invisibility. They shaped me, yes, but they also hardened me. And in a strange way, I'm grateful. Because if I had been coddled like my sister, maybe I wouldn't have learned how to fight for myself. Maybe I wouldn't have built the resilience that carried me through. When I look back now, I don't see just the pain. I see the arc, the girl they dismissed, the woman they couldn't ignore, and the justice that unfolded in ways none of them predicted. My sister lost the pedestal. My parents lost the illusion. And me? I found my freedom. So when people ask me if I regret how things turned out, my answer is simple. No. Because in the end, I didn't just get revenge, I got peace. And peace after years of chaos is the greatest justice of all. If you've ever been the invisible one, the scapegoat, the forgotten child in your family, know this. Your story isn't over. The people who dismiss you today might one day be forced to see your worth. And when that day comes, you'll realize you never needed their approval in the first place. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living so fully, so freely, that their opinions no longer matter. And if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from your own family, I want you to remember this. You are not alone. My story is just one of thousands, maybe millions. Families can wound the deepest, but those wounds can also fuel the kind of growth they never imagined possible. So if you've carried scars like mine, if you've faced the laughter, the neglect, the humiliation, let this be your reminder. You can rise. You can rewrite your story. And one day, you might even thank those scars for showing you how strong you really are. Because the truth is, justice doesn't always wear a dramatic face. Sometimes justice is you, standing tall, unshaken, and finally free. And if my story resonated with you, if you've lived through something similar, or you know someone who has, I'd love for you to share this video. Maybe it will give someone else the courage to step out of their shadows too. Like this video if you've ever felt underestimated, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine. Because trust me, the world needs them.